Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today, I'm here with Taylor Kaye. Taylor is a Canadian radio and TV personality whose work has been featured around the world. She is also a friend and colleague of mine, and we've known each other for, I think, about 20 years now. In 2022, her husband had a sudden and unexpected stroke, which left him partially paralyzed. Since then, she has been navigating her new role as a caregiver alongside also parenting her 3 daughters and her career. She joins us today to shed light on her experience and talk about spousal caregiving. Taylor, thank you so much for being here today. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Well, thank you. And I know when you initially asked me, because I've known you for years, I know I'd feel comfortable telling my story to you, Michelle, because there's been so many different people reaching out, and I appreciate it. But when Michelle reaches out, I'm coming on.
I thank you so much for that. That really does mean a lot to me. And, we've been having these conversations this is now our 4th season on Time to Talk, where we create this space for caregivers in Ontario to connect and share. And I really hope through our conversation today that someone else out there is going to see a little bit of something they recognize or relate to in your story, and that helps them in some way. So it's generous of you to share. And I want to talk to you. I want to begin at the beginning, and I know it's not a really easy story to tell, but actually before we even get there, I want you to tell me a little bit about Greg.
So Greg is an amazing husband. Prior to his stroke, he was, a doting father to our 3 tween and teens. He was very active. He did workouts daily, sometimes twice a day, meditated, yoga. He tracked his food. He was, did the protein shakes, did everything. Mr. Healthy. I was the one that, I'd have the Pepsi and Oreos in the morning, and I'm okay with that, where Greg would shrug and go, "What are you doing? We've got to protect our health for our kids." So when this stroke happened, we were in complete shock because Greg had had a full, he'd seen his doctor, blood pressure's great, everything. He had the body fat of a 20-year-old, all
Right.
that stuff that you're like, wow, okay, I feel good about myself. And then literally September 26th is when lightning struck our house and we had to go into action.
So that was in 2022, right?
Yes.
September 26th. And that's essentially when you became a caregiver. But did you identify immediately as, okay, I'm a caregiver now, or did this sort of happen later in your journey?
Well, I will say Greg and I have quite a bit of an age difference. So,
okay.
We had discussed not strokes, but, one day, when we're older, and with our age difference, we could, I think it's good as partners to talk about what you would do if someone was to get sick. You don't want, and it is a hard discussion to have, but because I've seen my mom caregive for my father, who had cancer, or caregive for my grandmother and aunts. My mom was a really big, I think that's all she did when I grew up. She taught and she was a caregiver to a ton of family members. So maybe that's how it's just innate in me. So that day, it did cross my mind. I'm like, my life's about to change. What I don't think what people don't know about me is yes, I'm a TV and radio personality, but I do have 4 years of kinesiology, and I did teach heart and stroke. I was a instructor trainer for CPR and first aid for over 20 years, maybe 25 years.
I didn't know that.
No, and I would teach paramedics how to do CPR and first aid. Like as an instructor trainer, you would go into businesses or large organizations or hospitals, and I would teach, even though they would probably know a little bit more than me, but because I'd had this instructor trainer status, I would instruct them to become instructors, if that makes sense.
No,
Then the nurses then would be the instructors, the paramedics, and go forward. But I would be able to relay that information as, I'm a presenter. So
Right.
whatever topic I'm presenting, but I used to be a lifeguard back in the day. So yes,
Me too.
I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Our hair's still fried. I still have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was able to notice the signs and symptoms right away of Greg's stroke in the morning, because I will say, that's the first thing they're like, how did you know? Because Greg only had aphasia. He wasn't able to talk. He could move all of his limbs. He actually walked himself to the paramedics and put himself on the bed, on the gurney, I guess, whatever you call it. Because he was very proud and was trying to, and the paramedics are like, no, we want to get you on. But he just was at that point in the morning of him having a stroke, he just could not talk. And that's when I knew like aphasia was happening, but I didn't know how severe.
Okay, so this is remarkable, because my next question was going to be, what your understanding of stroke and its effect on people and families before this happened. But obviously you had this core knowledge already, which was so helpful. So I assume that, if you could talk to anybody about this, because it's a very common thing. I have a close friend of mine who had a stroke at 48.
Wow. Yeah.
It's more common than we think about. What could you say to anyone out there that isn't as familiar with the signs and symptoms to help prepare them for that?
I think for anyone, it's take a CPR and first aid course. And I say that to kids all the time. Like I literally, honestly, 2 days ago, I was choking on something and my kid just came and pounded on my back. And I was like, OMG, I don't want to go down. I can't go down with the ship. And it's because I signed the girls up for CPR and first aid. And you can sign your children. I mean, yes, if you don't have kids, of course, your partner or neighbors. But take the course, take the 8 hours. It surprises me how many people don't have this type of training. Also familiarize yourself around wherever you are in Canada, in the US. I know everyone listens from all over, with the stroke protocols and the not heart, but like the heart attack protocols, which hospital you should be going to. This is the only thing that was really difficult for me as a spouse. I knew the stroke protocols. I asked for the specific hospital to go to, and sometimes the paramedics don't want to listen to the spouses. I knew the hospital that we had to go to, and they're like, no, this is where we're going to go. I'm like, but the stroke protocol says we need to go to a stroke center. And my neighbors even heard me that. And now I will say, with my neighbors hearing that, they know, because this is going to, I don't even think you know this, Michelle. My uncle had a stroke literally 2 weeks ago in front of my husband, Greg, and I at my house.
Oh my goodness. No, I didn't.
And the neighbors who now have taken first aid and CPR recognize my uncle. I'm his caregiver as well. Like he's able-bodied, but he's 71 and he visits quite often to assist with the kids, but I still care for him. He has no other family. He had fallen and wasn't able to speak. And he was having something called a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke. My neighbor, thank God, had recognized that and got Greg and I left Greg in his wheelchair with the neighbor and then went onto the ambulance. And already my neighbor had said to the ambulance driver, because they'd heard me before, saying, this is a stroke protocol. They need to go to this specific hospital. That's the only thing I think, not only, but that's something that everyone should know. You should know, and you probably already know, like, oh, this hospital is the cancer hospital. This hospital is the broken bones hospital. There's usually a children's hospital in an area. You want to go to the place where they can act fast.
I understand that. And it is an important reminder that we do need to advocate for ourselves and our loved ones. And you definitely did that to the best that you could.
Yeah.
In that situation. Were you prepared, even though you know the symptoms of stroke, were you prepared for the effect that having a loved one, having a partner that has had a stroke were you prepared for what effect it has on your family and on their lives?
I didn't really look into that, obviously. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I am a workaholic. I
Yes.
do work a lot. In our type of industry, you have to be on all the time. You can't, you know, even if you're having the worst day of your life, which I was having, you know, worst year of my life, I couldn't go on the radio or TV and, you know, start crying on
No.
TV. I'd have to be promoting whatever is promoting a concert or some type of brands or things. I think I'm pretty strong, but I didn't know how it would affect my children. And for sure, my eldest daughter, that was really tough because she also was going through bullying at a school, and we had just moved her to a new school. My husband, Greg, and I had decided, we're like, well, let's just move her. And this is in
Mm-hmm.
September. We'll figure it out next year. And 2 weeks into her being at that new school, he had a stroke. So imagine you're in high school, new school, you're being bullied. And now, you know, fathers and daughters usually have a good bond. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you look up to them. Most, I'm not going to say all, but like in our family, for sure, my daughters like look up to dad, and that was someone now that was not there to help protect her, and I was trying to protect her, but also advocating for Greg. So it was difficult. And you know, I think with kids, it's getting them into therapy right away, whatever that is. Um,
That's a great
what
point.
whether and it doesn't have to be like my younger ones were, they're in elementary school. They provided social workers right away. High schools sometimes do, but you know, there's sometimes free resources, and you just have to keep digging away for those free resources.
Well, that sort of plays into, I mean, this is a big question and maybe a difficult one to answer, but how are you doing and how are you navigating your role as a caregiver? And then you mentioned the supports at the elementary school, but how are you doing? And are there any resources that you've found that have been helpful for you?
You know, I'm very fortunate. Once I was digging away myself, but then when I went onto social media, and I mean, you don't have to have, and I know I'm on radio and TV, and you know, some of my friends were helping me after I went on, but you just have to reach out to people. You just have
Mm-hmm.
to ask. And I think a lot of people are afraid of asking for help, and there is help out there. Like, so there's the March of Dimes, there's the Heart and Stroke Foundation. There are many other, you know, there's the Aphasia Institute there. And then I will say there's, you know, I even reached out to friends of friends. At one
Mm-hmm.
point, I was like, hey, I went to a party with this person who said they were a doctor at this hospital. I wonder if they can help me. I didn't care. I reached out to them. And you have to like advocate because, and if they're busy and they say no, oh well, you know, I get asked for Taylor Swift tickets all the time. I can't get them. But sometimes you might reach that one person who's like, you know, they're having a good day, or they're like, yep, today's the day I want to help someone. And I was very fortunate where, you know, I'd reach out. Sometimes I would get no's, like, hey, I can't help you with this, but maybe connect with this person. And you had to keep following up. I had like literally like flow charts of, you know, what's going on. I will say starting a journal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the worst at writing things down. I don't know if Michelle, you know that, right? I'm just everything's in my head, but um
I can relate.
yeah, but it's writing a journal, and it can be just one word. It could be what's going on there. I was journaling Greg's progress and and no progress in his journal. Um and also just to journal my feelings. So that helped. But I would say reaching out and finding those organizations, and some support groups were not helpful. I'll be honest. Like, and I'm still looking at that now. For example, Greg was dropped off somewhere and we didn't have a ride. And I've just found out there's a new free ride program with volunteers uh, for stroke survivors. And because he'll be dropped off on a bus, and it's very difficult with his type of wheelchair to get places unless you have a wheelchair like an accessible vehicle. But use social media for, you know, for what it is. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
get you're going to get haters. And that's the only thing. People are going to write things. There's some information that was sent to me that I'm like, oh my gosh, what are people thinking? Like,
Go
for
ahead.
example, I will share, like, and no, you go ahead. Like, I just,
Well, you know, this is the thing that I was going to bring up, because you mentioned it took you a while. I'm not going to say a long time, but it took you almost a year to share what you had gone through. And your life is a little bit different because you have a very public job. So for, you know, the implications of sharing what you're going through on social are different than perhaps someone that doesn't have a very public career. But you chose to do so. And I'm glad you got people reaching out to be helpful. And on the flip side, I'm very sorry that you got people reaching out to be the absolute opposite of that. But I'm glad that you are encouraging people to share their story through what channels they do have, because hopefully the good will outweigh the bad with that outcome. But you unfortunately did encounter some difficult things.
Well, and my friends for a year, they kept saying you need to share because the good will outweigh the bad. But you're right, because of what I do for a living, I'm used to the haters. I'm used to, and they're not all the time, but there's trolls, right? And I think people can relate maybe if you're on social media, you write something on Facebook about your kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews, and then people attack you on something. You don't have to be a person like a public persona. Like, there's always going to be those people. But again, I thought the good would outweigh the bad. So I had to share because I'm going through this in a positive, strong way. I do have my moments, but at some points, you know, somebody wrote, I would have just unplugged him. Like, somebody wrote that and DM me it with a fake Instagram account. And then I went after them. Like, I was like, what? And then I'm like, what am I, and by went after them, I'm like, because of my business, I'm like, I can find out where you are, where this posted. And then I'm like, why? Who cares? I don't, you know, if someone had the time to write that, that's too bad. But
I'm sorry, Taylor.
It's awful. And you know what? I will say, you do have to have those discussions. Greg was on a ventilator. He was in a coma, his own coma. He not only had a stroke, but he also had part of his skull removed to relieve the pressure of the stroke. And then that put him into the coma, and he was on a ventilator. And, you know, we were not given any good news. It was like, he will not see, he will not hear, he will not eat, he will not walk. Like, it was like, so what do you want to do? And I will say the doctors, when we were in ICU, they would come to me quite often because I was there. I treated that as my full-time job. During the day, I would work my shift, and then I would work another shift and just be with Greg for 8 to 10 hours a day and spend time with him. And which I don't even know how I did it, Michelle. Like, I don't even know.
I don't know either. I will say, though, one of the more immediate takeaways I had when you did share publicly what was going on, other than concern for you, was because for all this time you had to keep up your very public job. It is such a reminder that you never know what people are going through.
Right.
That
and to be,
to be kind. Yeah. And to share that. And that sounds like, and then of course, on top of all that, you're a mom to 3 girls. So go ahead.
No, you're right. And they remind me, because last year they didn't see me, and they remind me, they're like, Mommy, you kept Daddy alive. Now it's time to keep us alive. And I'm keeping them alive. As Greg would joke, and back in the day when he would go away on trips, he's like, make sure to, you know, water and feed the children. So, but at times, like, I was relying on neighbors to bring food, because I'm like, I need to be with Greg every minute to make sure I'm advocating. And I was hoping he'd wake up, which eventually he did, but it was difficult. And I would FaceTime the girls. It's not like I neglected them completely, but I look back last year, and there was times they were just left with neighbors or slept over at school friends' houses for a couple of days, so that they had a mom and a family caregiver for themselves, and they felt comfortable. And I will say they play their sports, they do their dance, they do their soccer, and all of the teachers are like, your kids are grounded. And it's because I just kept going through work and I'm like, I'm not crying in the corner. Have they seen me cry? Yes. Have they seen me scream in the car for no reason? And they're like, what the heck just happened there? But they know that's just, it's a release. It's okay to cry and scream.
Looking for support and connection as a caregiver? Our online support group is here for you. Join a community of fellow caregivers who understand the ups and downs of your role. Share your concerns and successes in a supportive environment led by trained peer support group facilitators who have firsthand experience as caregivers. Please note that our online support groups are not intended for crisis support or mental health counseling. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca to learn more. And now, back to our episode.
Part of you as a parent teaching your children sort of, there's a multitude of ways that you can deal with this, and sometimes just being absolutely authentic to what you're feeling in the moment is the best thing that you can do. Now, a year on, or more than a year on, how are you finding balancing your role as a caregiver with parenting? Because Greg's condition is relatively stable at this point and progressing. Yeah. So how are you balancing that now?
It's still difficult because I'm still advocating for him to get like into an outpatient program. All of these things that you thought, oh, you just get this stuff. You don't. And that was a big lesson for me. Like even getting him into his inpatient program when he was kind of stable, that was difficult, where I called in favors. And again, that was like me reaching out to someone who I went to a party with once who has a cousin I was like digging so deep. And now that he's stable-ish, he's been rushed back to the hospital twice. I've just had to speak to the girls and just like, sometimes, we don't know with daddy what's going to happen, but let's just enjoy every moment. And, he goes, we take him to Blue Jays games for when it was baseball. We're surprising him with the Raptors game for Christmas, for basketball. We're picking accessible places to take him out, where things he would do. We're realizing that a lot of places are not accessible. And I feel like an idiot I shouldn't say idiot, but I feel like I was not aware that there was all these places that were not accessible. You just assume everything's accessible. And Greg's birthday and my birthday are coming up, and we have the same birthday. And I decided to have a birthday party for him, and it was really difficult to find a place that was accessible for his large chair. There's places for walkers and canes, but Greg has a pretty large chair because he's paralyzed on the one side. And if you look at him on social media, people are like, oh, he looks great, but he is nonverbal. He's not able to communicate, and he's not able to move his left side. And people are like, well, then maybe he can write. He can't write. So it's the worst game of charades every day of my life. That's all I can say. Like, and I suck at charades. I'm like, do you want a water? Do you want an apple juice? We joke sometimes, and hopefully he will like use a machine once we get approved for, it's called an AAC, like a augmentative communication device. But again, that all takes time.
Yeah, there is a process involved with it. And I mean, you've given us a good indication of how things are going now. And the fact is that you've talked to your girls about sometimes we don't know.
Right.
In general, since that day back in September of 2022, how have you talked about what's happening with Greg, with your girls? Has that always sort of, I mean, I know it's this thing where when you're in it in the moment, especially when it's all happening, there's no plan, right? Yeah. But if you can kind of share any sort of insight or advice with sort of how to communicate about this with children based on your journey, what would you say?
I think it's sitting them down. We have family meetings, and then they roll their eyes, and I don't care. And I'm like, family meeting time. And then, sometimes my eldest is the teen of the family, and she's like, oh, another family meeting. But I'm like, we have to discuss what we're going to do to continue to make ourselves happy too. Like, we're trying to create happiness for daddy, but we need to live our lives too. And we can't feel guilty. And I
Mhm.
will say that my girls have told me that, because like, you need to live your life, mommy. All you're doing is working, caring for daddy. And then sometimes I feel like Cinderella in the house, and people are like,
Mm.
oh, but you have help. I actually, I don't have help. I think because people think you're a public persona, like there's a nanny or whatever. I'm like, I'm not a Kardashian. It's me. And I will call on a favor of a neighbor sometimes, or things like that. That's it. And a PSW, obviously, that assists with Greg, that the government, allows for, and things like that. But I think it's sitting your kids down and managing their expectations, financial expectations too. Like, we sat down right away when things happen with Greg, and I'm like, guys, things are going to change. Like,
Mhm.
daddy's care is going to be very expensive. They don't like talking about money, but I think you got to get over that with kids. And you're not like, oh, here's my savings account, but I tell them how much it costs to take care of daddy. Like, now we're figuring out, like, okay, where would they go to? My eldest is like, maybe I'll switch where I go to college, university, to be closer to home, so that she can stay home, because I don't know how we will afford that. Right. You figure it out. Money
Mhm.
comes in, it comes out, it flows. But I think that's a conversation you should have for your kids. Maybe not toddlers, but like, you can talk about like things that, maybe it's not so many snacks or treats. I don't know. Like, my kids are tweens and teens. So, they would go to, Friday treat day at Starbucks is now, maybe every couple of weeks or something like that. Cause that type of stuff adds up. Also talking to them about caring for their dad. And that was really hard because they're scared. They did not want to go see Greg at the hospital because he was missing
Mm.
half of his head. Like,
Right.
most of the pictures that now I'll post on social, I put a hat on him in the hospital, um, because they didn't want to see him like that. And same with his friends.
Mhm.
I pressured his friends, whether they liked it or not. I'm like, you need to see Greg, because
Right.
people start to drop off. Because that individual is not the individual you knew prior. Like, at September 2022, Greg changed to Greg 2.0.
Mhm.
Some people are still around, which are great. He has Friday night guy nights where I'm not allowed to go, and they take him to a pub, and I don't know what happens there. But he has one good hand. I'm sure he's having a drink. I don't know. I'm not allowed to. But again, back to the kids, it's talking to them and having those family meetings, whether they roll their eyes or not, and discussing, and discussing some of their hopes and dreams, because some of their hopes and dreams also included possibly, whether it's a mother or father, whoever this is affecting. And, some people are going through terminal cancer or whatever. Like, plan those special family moments.
Yeah, I love how you've broken down so many big things, like the hopes and dreams, and then also the little things, because the little, like the weekly treats or all that kind of, where am
Yeah.
I going to go to school? There's this cluster of things that is all interconnected, and the little things start to become big things.
Yeah.
And it is sort of just being open and honest with your children and transparent. I really think the financial picture at all, for everyone is important for your children to understand once they're a certain age, but certainly in a situation like this. You mentioned the difficulty initially that your children had going to the hospital. Of course, it can be an intimidating place, and the situation that Greg was going through was obviously, that's an additional layer. How has your girls' relationship with Greg and yourself, how has that changed? You mentioned that they are helping with the caregiving. Have they sort of been able to identify themselves as a caregiver for Greg, as well as him still being their dad as well?
I think in a way, like, my eldest has, because she'll help feed Greg. She won't help change him or bathe or anything like that, but she'll help with that. She'll make him special protein balls or things that he would have he enjoyed, that, and they would make juices together, like with the juicing machine.
Mm-hmm.
So she's assisting with him with that. The other two are connecting with him in a different way. They're Snapchatting with him. So, which is, I will say, uh, when Greg was unconscious and, in a coma in a ventilator, I still FaceTimed every day with the girls. It was very difficult for them because Greg was the way he was. But I would say, here's daddy. We're just doing some stuff, talking. And then when Greg was kind of coming to, I was showing him how to FaceTime, because your brain can sometimes retrain itself with neuroplasticity. So now he can actually FaceTime with the girls and Snapchat. It's not always perfect. The phone's upside down or it's sideways because, again, his brain is, half of it is really not there. But he was doing a funny filter yesterday. I do ask the girls because they're scared still when Greg is here, because it's not daddy. They're like, it's not daddy, but it's daddy. I don't know how they know. But I asked them to do like get ready with me because this is the age that does that. So in the morning, we involve him. So if he can't, because we have the house has different floors and he can't have access to it. So instead of him yelling to get down, because he would yell at the girls, come on, let's go. He's watching like my daughter put on her makeup, doing a get ready video with him. And she's like, what do you think of this lipstick? So involving him and involving them in that has really helped. But it's the non-medical caregiving. So there's a loving component there, but I will say there was nurses that they're like, we want to show your daughters how to do a catheter. We want to show them how to change them. And listen, if your kids want to do that, go for it. My kids, I've said no. I want them to see Greg the way he was, the way he is. And eventually, if they want to help me with that, that's great. I can handle all that. I just don't want that for my family. And it's really difficult, Michelle, because people will come in and they're like, your kid should be doing this. Your kids, and you have to be strong. Because sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe my kid should. And I'm like, nope. This is what we want for our family. And this what works, because it's been really hard for them to even get close to Greg because they were scared.
I really respect you advocating in that way for your kids and sort of being able to delineate like this, having the relationship be this way versus them being involved in, like you said, putting in catheters and things like that. This is going to help them feel like he's their dad still. And that maybe is what they need more right now than option B. So that makes a lot of sense that you've made that delineation and that you're listening to what, I mean, this is it's a hard line to walk.
It is,
Taylor. And I have so much respect for you because you're doing the best you can as a parent. You're doing the best you can as a spouse and caregiver. And it's even on days that it doesn't feel like it's remarkable to you, it's remarkable to everybody else. So just so you know that it really is. Is there a way that you find it effective? You mentioned about, a time that your kids just kind of heard you yell in the car out of frustration. Is there a way that you encourage your children to vent their feelings or allow them to sort of express how they're feeling in the moment?
Yes. I encourage them to continue with therapy. Sometimes they don't want to do their therapy because they're over therapy. But, there's times where if they're, 2 years ago, if they're like, I'm feeling down, I want to stay home from school, I'd be like, now you're going. But I can feel, I don't want to say feel their vibrations, but I know it's not like, oh, I want to skip school because I have a test thing. So, or whatever. I let them stay home if they're having a day because, for example, yesterday, my teen called me while I was on the radio and she's like, I feel like I just couldn't do today. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And she's like, I'm just so down and I don't know why I'm down. I'm like, well, you are down because of daddy. And sometimes it's just subconscious. It's there. And if you need to take a break from whatever, take a break, go home. And she likes making protein balls. So I said, go make some protein stuff. Use the good chocolate that's in my hidden area. And whatever you got to do, that's her therapy, is baking and cooking. And the other two love being with their friends. They're at this age, like tweens and teens are narcissists. We know that. They don't. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard for Greg sometimes to realize that because when he's here, they don't want to be here. And I'm like, he'll point to himself and we'll have the charades. I'm like, are you upset because they're not here and we're watching a movie? And he'll say yes. I'm like, but Greg, they wouldn't have been here anyway. You have to understand they're teenagers and tweens. They don't want to be here they're in and out. And our house has stayed the same. Again, and people have judged us. We have a chaotic house. We are that house on the street where people come in and out all the time. It's open door. And for some people that is, they don't like that. I grew up that way. So I feel like it's helped with Greg and his healing, because neighbors have come and I'm like, so what? He's in a wheelchair. So what? Like, let's go. You want to go walk the dogs? Let's put him in his chair. Let's go walk the dogs. It's just a different version. I'm trying to like get away from like, this is a medical place. Like, it's our home, but you are sometimes like part-time running a long-term care place.
Well, I would say, and because you're this sort of open door sort of home that everyone's welcome and it's in and out, where I also feel that that's, you were able, because of that community that you've built, to have that support of your neighbors and your friends when you needed it. And I think that that's also an important lesson. And maybe for Greg, obviously there's different things he needs at home now in terms of how things are configured, perhaps, et cetera, et cetera. But he also needs his home to feel like a home. Right?
Yeah, and it not to be weird. Like, it would be weird if people aren't here. Now, listen, when he needs a break, I kick people out. I'm like, peace out, get out. Like, because he gets exhausted. His brain is almost like a computer. I know when it's going to shut down, and then he's like completely vacant. It's very bizarre. But I try not to. You're going to have to change some things in your life. Like, obviously, when something like this happens, finances, possibly your job. My job at the time, I'm a freelancer. And what that means is I pick up jobs and you'll see me on TV or radio, but I work for a specific company, but I really work for myself. So if I don't work, you don't get paid as a freelancer. I guess it's like a contractor, just,
exactly. Yeah.
So I was able to move my schedule around, and some days I don't want to swear, but it's a crap show. Like yesterday, someone was supposed to help me with Greg, and he was going to his outpatient, and I shouldn't say supposed to, but somebody had offered, and I'll take that offer. And we had planned it. And I'm like, so you can do this, right? Because I'm live on TV. I cannot get off TV. And then they canceled, and I then canceled. I would never cancel live TV. I had to cancel live TV because I did not want Greg to miss his outpatient program. And Greg was mad at me. He's like, oh, I knew he was just doing his sign language kind of with me with this one hand, but I'm like, it is what it is. So there's things that'll have to change. I kick myself because I'm a workaholic, Michelle, you know that, but
I absolutely know that,
but I've dropped about 40% of my work just because that has to be for Greg. I have to make sure that he is taken care of, because I know he would do the same for me.
Our online support group offers a community of fellow caregivers who understand the challenges and rewards of your role. Connect with trained peer support group facilitators with firsthand experience as caregivers, and share your concerns and successes in a safe and supportive environment. Join us today and experience the power of community. For more information, call 1-833-416-2273. That's 1-833-416-CARE. And now, back to our episode.
Your life has changed radically. What do you find now that you are juggling these roles? As you're already juggling a lot as a mom to 3 girls and a partner and your very, very busy career. What do you find has helped you in this journey? We talked a little bit about supports and some things being less reliable than others, but what are you doing to take care of yourself and find the support that you need right now?
I need to do more of it, but I am talking to a grieving therapist. And I think that's important, because I'm grieving the loss of what would be. You have plans with your spouse, and there's times I'm like, well, we were supposed to do this, and that's not going to happen. We were, whatever our plans were to travel. Greg had recently retired to care for the girls, and so that I could amp up my career. And he was helping me with my stuff as well. So he was a little workaholic as well. But talking to that grieving counselor, but there are some things that I'm setting into motion in the new year for myself as well. Like, I'm going to work out. And this is from my children chiming in. Because again, I have that kinesiology degree. I always worked out. yes, I talked about Pepsi and Oreos. I'm fine with that. Like you can have that.
That's
But
balance.
that's balance. I would get
That's
up I would get up at 5:36 every morning and do a workout, and that was out of my day. I have not done a proper consistent workout like that since Greg had a stroke. It drips in and out of weeks. Some weeks are good, some weeks, but I need to do that for myself. And I think I need to take a day off and maybe have someone else be here with Greg, because mentally, and it doesn't, I don't get my nails done. I don't have to do facials, but it's like, I don't even care. Back to the coffee shop, just going to a coffee shop and like, I don't know, reading a book, right? That has nothing to do with strokes. And because you can go down that rabbit hole. So I'm not the best right now at taking care of myself, and people are checking in all the time. And like I'm doing the best to make sure the girls are happy and healthy. Greg is happy and healthy-ish. And then I will focus on myself soon.
And I do not ask that question to put any pressure on you, because I understand that like we can also make ourselves worse by going into the cycle of thinking, what am I doing for me? Because you're just trying to make sure you do everything. And that in and of itself is a sense of accomplishment. So if, I don't want to make it sound like you taking care of you is another thing that you have to check off the list, but just to sort of, share with our listeners what works for you right now.
I also want to I'll share with the listeners, like, I shouldn't say this, but I am a caregiver, but I don't define myself as a caregiver. That's just one part of me. I'm a mom. I'm a radio personality. I do TV. I do voiceover. I also care for my husband. I think, and my mom was a caregiver, and that consumed her life. She was a teacher, but she cared a lot for people, and she has difficulty helping me now, because I think she sees herself in me, and my mom hasn't been able to help at all. Like she's also older, right?
Yeah.
And she was younger when she was caring for her parents and her own spouse. But yes, you are a caregiver, but find something else to identify as, because then you again get lost in that rabbit hole. Maybe you're an amazing baker. You are a rock star. I like to crochet. I call myself the happy hooker with crochet. I'm really crappy at it, but it's kind of meditative. But as much as we identify that can't consume you, because, that person you're caring for wants so much from you, they want you to enjoy your life too. And it's not like, go away on a trip. Like, I mean, I will say there was people that at the hospital, they thought I worked there full time. One doctor said to me, he's like, what's your shift here? I'm like, I'm a spouse.
Oh, wow.
So I was there that often. And he's like, you need to take a break. But, again, back to, don't just identify as a caregiver. You're more than that. You are, for me, like I said, I'm a mom. I work, but I mean, maybe you're a parent, you're a grandparent, you're an aunt or an uncle, whoever you are, make sure you have something else so that you're just not a caregiver.
I was going to end with asking you for advice, but I think you just gave us some of the best advice that we could share with people. But I mean, if you have anything else, I mean, I think that whole thing about just, it doesn't have to be about, self-care in a sort of like bubble baths and a glass of wine sort of thing, but just
I'll take that. Sure.
I will take that as well. And the spa appointments and all those kind of things, but just sort of the self-care of your own identity, of not getting entirely lost even if it's just, like you said, reading a book for the pure enjoyment of reading a book that doesn't have to do with the person you're caring for's condition. That makes so much sense.
And I will say, and you can talk to any of my friends and like you DM me, I am the worst at writing stuff down. I am Rain Man. I have everything in my head. I can tell you what happened on a certain day at a time. I'm that crazy type of person. When things happen with Greg, I started to write things down with checklists, because Greg was a big checklist person, and put the positive stuff on this checklist where it's like, went to an apple orchard. I mean, whatever. Things that are going to make you happy that week, Yes, you'll have your schedule of who you're caring for and what you're doing. You know, for me, it's Greg and all of his appointments. And some of his appointments are like, I'm not even joking, 30 hours a week of stuff on top of a full-time job. But in that, I also have, I'm going to go to Starbucks. I'm going to go get Women's World magazine, which is a trashy magazine that I read. And then I look at my list, I'm like, that brings me joy. So do that. If you're not a list person, listen, I was not a list person either. Create a list, write those moments of joy in there and make them happen. And if they don't happen that day, push them to the next day. And and maybe have the bubble bath and wine too. Put that on the list.
Do that too. And whatever else you can do to relax. Taylor, I can't thank you enough for your generosity in sharing your story and Greg's story and the girl's story with us. I have no doubt that someone is going to listen to this and be able to find something that they can relate to. And as always, as you have always done, as long as I've known you and your listeners and viewers have known you, you always do bring some lightness, some levity, and a little bit of humor. So we also appreciate that. But we understand how busy you are. So we really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you've been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.